Hi, everyone. On today's podcast, we're going to talk with Janae and Andrew Rick about their breech vaginal birth story. Welcome to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. My name is Rebecca Decker, and I'm a nurse with my PhD and the founder of Evidence-Based Birth. Join me each week as we work together to get evidence-based information into the hands of families and professionals around the world. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. See ebbirth.com/disclaimer for more details. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Janae and Andrew Rick to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. Janae is a senior graphic designer for a makeup company, and in her spare time, she loves painting and doing art projects. Andrew is in the restaurant industry, working as a barback and bartender in Minneapolis. Andrew buys and resells sneakers and exclusive name brand clothing on the side as a hobby. They recently bought their first home in St. Paul Park in October of 2020, then gave birth to their first baby, a boy named Jenoa, in January 2021, and he arrived on his due date. Janae and Andrew are graduates of the Evidence-Based Birth Childbirth Class with instructors Heather Christine Struwe and Rhonda Fellows, and they're here to share their very unique birth story about their vaginal breech birth. Welcome, Janae and Andrew, to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, thanks for having us.
So, tell us how you found out about the Evidence-Based Birth Childbirth Class and got connected with Heather Christine and Rhonda.
So we ended up hiring a doula, recommended the class to us, and I had known her for a little while, and she just kind of came across like she had been in it before, and she just kind of suggested it to us, so we looked into it, and it sounded perfect, and we wanted to take some kind of birth class, but this was awesome because it ended up covering so many topics for us. So it was the best decision.
So this was your first baby?
It
Yes.
is.
Yeah. And Andrew, what about you? Like, what were your thoughts going into it? Hiring a doula, taking a childbirth class, was that something you were interested in doing as well? Or were you just kind of not sure what your role was?
I was completely game for all of it. Me personally, it's more knowledge is better. I learned a lot from the class and the doula, but it definitely is not like the Hollywood movies make it out to be. I'll tell you that much. To be honest with you, it was like, I wouldn't change anything about that. Like the knowledge that I took from that, it was just fascinating, to the fact that the percentages, this, that, it's just mind blowing. So yes, I was all for it.
That's awesome. More knowledge is better. I love that.
Talking about taking some kind of class, and I had been doing like research for years because wanting to plan to have a baby, and he was like, we need to take a class in this, and there's so many options out there, but this is just kind of covers nearly everything.
Yeah.
So what was your experience like taking the class then with Rhonda and Heather Christine?
It was awesome. There was a lot of information kind of crammed in, but it was nice. Like there's a nice group of people, it wasn't huge, and with COVID, just doing it on Zoom, it worked well just to meet like every week it was, and having conversations and hearing about other people's pregnancies and things too. It was nice to kind of just have conversations with them and ask questions, and they were open, after the class is done to like follow up if we had things we wanted to talk about and stuff. And it's already like, when I was done immediately, I started recommending it to coworkers and other people, like, you guys need to check this out.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have the full experience. I mean, I know COVID taking a toll on everybody and everything. That was the one thing about the class that, for me at least, it was just kind of crammed. So I kind of felt a little overwhelmed at like the end of the week because it was like, okay, we got this much homework.
Were you taking the accelerated class or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is an experience with it. So there was a lot of information really fast.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So normally people complete it in about 6 weeks, but you probably completed it in 4 or less.
4, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, even like the guidance from the instructors, it gave us all the keys, it was sorry. It's like all the keys and information, and then they also gave us all the information for if we want to go do some research ourselves in the platforms. So that was nice.
So you were taking the class with Heather Christine and Rhonda and the other parents, and what kind of birth were you planning at that point when you were taking the class?
From the beginning, I wanted to try it for a natural birth, and learning throughout the class just more about cesareans, I was just kind of like, really, it made me realize like that was the last thing that I wanted, unless, we absolutely needed to. So just learning about like our options and what we could do for pain relief and all these different things. So I just really was aiming to go for a natural birth, but I was open to, anything, just being flexible with whatever would happen, because you never know.
Mm-hmm. And were you planning a hospital birth then?
Yep. We were planning a hospital birth, and I wanted to see midwives my whole pregnancy, which I did up until the end, I guess, just because just learning so much about, I don't know, the difference between midwives and OB doctors. And like, I thought a birth center would be cool, but for us, it was like, I just want to be at a hospital to be, extra safe with our first baby.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you discover that Jenoa was breech?
We found out at 35 and a half weeks, and we were at a regular appointment, and, they feel on your belly, and we had been seeing different midwives because we didn't know who we would have when I went into labor. And so it was very surprising. It was definitely overwhelming because I was like, no way. I was kind of in disbelief. And then she ended up getting us into an ultrasound technician to confirm that he was breech. And I was just, oh my God, my mind was racing. And I was just like, oh, what? How didn't we figure this out? Later, I found out that that's when they start to check around that time. So it was a lot.
And Andrew, were you allowed in the prenatal appointments at this time? Because this is all during COVID. So could you go with her?
Yeah, yep. We're able to. It's like we kind of were catching those waves where they kept going up and down, being like, okay, your partner can be in, your partner can't be in, and we're always catching the wave of I could be in. So that was kind of a blessing, because in the very beginning, when we were first going to our appointments, I did have to sit outside. That was in the very beginning, and I would sit outside, and it was this kind of all seeing like a group of individuals in separate cars, waiting for their partners, going for their checkups and everything else. I was just like, wow, this is crazy. And then that was just a lot to take in, and we're kind of like bummed out going into like just the process. Like, this isn't what we wanted, but then we're very fortunate because we were just catching those waves. So
you were together when they told you that baby was breech?
Yeah. And there had been an appointment where he wasn't in, and he was there, and I was so overwhelmed. I'm like, thank goodness, because I was like, I need some water. Like, it was just a lot.
I was deer in the headlights when they said breech. I knew about breech, but for some reason when they said it, I was completely thrown off. I was like, what is breech again? What's going on? What's happening?
So it was shocking.
Yeah, very shocking.
So I felt like I was tricked. Like, well, what I thought was, I was feeling like his butt has actually been his head.
He tricked you.
Yeah.
And did you have any other thoughts and feelings aside from being just really surprised?
I was like, okay, kind of like, what are we going to do? And then after that, we reached out to our doula. And then after talking with her, I felt a little bit better. And then that kind of led us into like our new birth plan, I guess.
Yeah.
From there.
It was a little bit to take in, or take on, just because you have a plan already set up in your mind, in your head, of like how you want to go about this. And then you get thrown this curveball. It's kind of like, okay, game changer, we got to switch it up. And that was a little overwhelming for me, at least, just because it was like, okay, we have enough time. I kept telling myself, it was like, we have enough time, but at the same time, it's not a lot of time, because he's almost here, So for me, at least, it was a little overwhelming. But again, talking with the doula, it actually put me at ease. And then actually looking at more information and actually digging deep and finding out like you can do this and there's options and whatnot, it actually helped out a lot.
So what was the first thing you did then after he was confirmed breech? Did you try to do different things to make room for him to turn?
We did, yeah. People in the birth world, like, I feel like they all, at least in the Twin Cities, they all know each other. So our doula was a great resource. And then she referred us to go see a chiropractor who's certified in the Webster technique. So I started doing that. And I started to get like some lower back pain around that time too. So it was a good decision. And she had used spinning babies before and recommended that. So I was like, oh, I've heard of that. So then we started that whole process. And so there's, all these exercises you do with spinning babies. We started doing that every day. And I went for an appointment to go see a bodywork specialist that has worked with mothers who have breech babies before. And then I went there and that was great. And she gave me a moxa stick. And then we started doing moxibustion at home. She was like, anybody can do it. Like she just showed us, and Andrew like jumped on board. He was really enthusiastic about everything. Like, there were times I was just like, okay, we got to do all this. He's like, yeah, let's go. And I'm like, okay. Like, when you get to do all of those things every day to try to turn him and open up space. I mean, it was a lot. It was time consuming, but I was like, he's going to turn. We're going to, get him to turn around. Yeah. And just like having the, talking to a baby and saying like, hey, like we need you to turn around and, just trying to like communicate with him too. And then after that, we ended up trying for an ECV procedure.
Well, actually, from our doula, we heard about an OB that practices in ECV doing.
We got a consultation.
Yeah, we got a consultation because they only proceed after a consultation to see if you're fit for ECV and everything else. So,
and for those of you who are listening, ECV stands for external cephalic version, sometimes called a breech version, where it's like a hands-on technique where they use their hands on your belly to turn the baby. Is a medical procedure. And so what did they say at that consultation?
So we went to go see an OB doctor for that, which was the first time for an appointment because again, I've been seeing midwives, so I went to go see an OB doctor. And I wanted to point out too that she did not want, or they weren't allowing partners at the appointments. And I was like, this is really serious. I need my husband here. Like phone calls and FaceTime, sometimes you can't hear and it doesn't work well all the time. So I like really had to put my foot down and like advocate for myself. Like I need him here to be. And then she finally let him in, which was like, I think just the EBB class helped me like be like, no, listen. Yeah. So he ended up being able to come in, and the consultation, honestly, with that doctor did not go very well. He seemed to like try to push cesarean on us. And I explained to her that that's not what I wanted. And she got just her body language, she got, I don't know. I felt like
you remember. I mean, they was telling me, she was like, I'm gonna remember this for the rest of my life. Like just the position and the posture that she gave right after that, we said that we don't want a cesarean, or she sat up straight, crossed her arms, and kind of gave us like the frown like face.
She got all huffy kind of.
Yeah, definitely. And it was one of those like.
I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just throwing off.
She's like, well, why wouldn't you want that? And I was like, well, these are the reasons. And I felt like she was like pointing the finger at us.
Yeah, like, if it was.
I was like, that's just not. I don't think that's for me. And she's, well, if there was an emergency, and I was like, oh, absolutely, then we would need to do that.
I felt judgment kind of being okay, like I get where you're coming from, and yes, obviously, worst case scenario for anything, we're going to do whatever it takes for the baby, But at the same time, we also want to try to. There has to be other options, just don't set it in stone like this is it, and it make us feel bad to the fact that we want to explore other options possibly, or any kind of ideas of anything that could possibly change,
Yep. So then we just kind of learned about the procedure itself, that, how they push on your stomach externally and try to rotate the baby. And she said that like there could be bruising, and talking about different like pain relief measures. And like there's a chance that I would go into labor, and just finding out later that that's very rare, like all of those things. And so we ended up leaving that appointment just not feeling very great about being supported.
Yeah, well, also, and we also like asked her too about like her cesarean rate, like the percentages and everything else. And in the ECV, and she said to us that she's like, I don't know any of. And I was just like, well, haven't you done this? Like, I mean, you've had to have success and not successful attempts, and like, you don't have a percentage. Like, no, I don't. And then next thing you know, later on in it, she mentioned that well, Nay asked, like, would you be the one doing the cesarean? Because we would like to meet the OB that would be doing the cesarean, if
or
possible. Yeah, even the procedure. And she was like, no, it won't be me. I don't do that. Then she said again later, oh, I do that. It was a weird, like, experience. Not great, not pleasant, to where it was just, why do we even come here, you know?
And I'm like, I want the doctor who's going to do the ECV procedure. And she just couldn't really answer all of our questions and the success rate. I was like, I need to know. And she's like, oh, just very vague about that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, that's kind of when we had a bigger conversation with our doula. And then she referred us to go check out this doctor in Wisconsin who was known to do breech deliveries, who could do ECV procedures and cesareans.
It's a one-stop shop.
It's so funny when going back to that appointment with the OB who, was judgmental and basically didn't tell you the truth, didn't know their statistics. I was just texting with my sister the other day, who's a doctor, and she was like, no offense, but sometimes, I want to take these doctors and say, I know this is not how you were taught in medical school. Like,
yeah.
You are totally not performing medicine the way you should be. All right, let's go on. So you got another opinion, which I think is so important. Because a lot of people, they would go to an appointment like that, they would feel really disappointed, and they would say, well, I guess all I can do is have a cesarean. Like, there's no other option. And you, on the other hand, you used your resources, you talked to your doula, and you found another doctor who could give another opinion. So tell us about that.
Yes, that was just, I was like, this can't be it. We can't settle. So she had actually worked with this doctor before. So I looked into it. And I found out that I was covered by insurance because that was important to me. Mm-hmm. And we called about the ECV consultation, and they were like, we just kind of do it all together. You come in, and if you're fit, we can do it right there. So that's what we did. And we packed our bags at the very slim chance that I would go into labor. And we went there and met with him, asked all of our questions ahead of time, and we were ready to go. So we tried for the ECV. The doctor attempted 3 times, and our little baby didn't want to turn. So his booty was like moving, but his head was just like, he didn't want to go. So, and the doctor was like, okay, I think that's it. And he didn't want to push it too far. Well,
tell us a little bit more about the ECV experience itself then. First of all, what gave you the confidence in this doctor to go ahead with the procedure?
I think just him having that experience and being so well known around here. I had talked to, our chiropractor, our doula, even the instructors from the EBB class knew of this doctor. So it's just like, okay, this sounds like the person to go to. No. Just this birth world seems so small that everybody knows each other. So it was definitely.
Everybody that we talked to, like just mentioned, they loved him, and the vibes that we got just felt great, even before we met him, and going out there to even go through the ECV process, it just felt like this was it, And then, even the insurance lady even knew who he was. That was surprising to me. She was like, oh, yeah, we know who he is. I'm just like, oh, geez.
He's got a reputation for helping people out.
Yeah, but it's more so also the fact that it's not necessarily just the fact that he does like the ECV and he does a cesarean, and then he can also just do the regular birth. It was more so the feeling, the vibe that you get from him, and the place. Like, you just feel like you're in good hands. It's not necessarily like OB. It's more like a midwife. It's more like, hey, I'm here to execute your birth plan as best as we possibly can. I'm willing to listen.
And we learned that clinic or hospital runs their practice like a birth center. And this is an OB doctor, but he practices like a midwife. So it just felt like all of our wishes were in line with how they do things.
Yeah. And that's another, even like for the ECV, that's another reason why we went out there. And also it was crunch time, there's not too many OBs that do vaginal breech within our area, I can't remember how many they said. It was 3 or something. Don't quote me on that, but it's very little, there's a lot more midwives and whatnot that do practice that for at-home birth, but we still want to be in a hospital, just because it was our first, and especially to the fact that he's breech, it was one of those, if we do go through this process, we want to be able to be right there in case something, an emergency cesarean.
How many weeks were you when you had the ECB then?
37 and a half.
Yep.
And they like to do it as close to 37 weeks as possible because then you're considered full term. And if, something would be to happen, you have to have baby.
Mm-hmm.
And the further or the longer you wait, the bigger baby gets.
Yeah, it makes it harder
it is to turn them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what was the experience like? Did you have any pain control, or like what did you do for that?
That, to be honest, was like, so after our first appointment with that other OB, it was one of those, she was talking about bruising and this and that. And then when we get here, they're talking like, no, I mean, you're like, it can happen, but that just means that they don't know what they're doing. And then also with the pain meds and everything, he doesn't prefer it because it's better to be natural. He's all about natural,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had asked and they're like, we don't really, and I'm like, okay, well, let's try it. And I kind of thought to myself, well, this will be a kind of inkling to see like what kind of pain I can handle going into birth. But it was fine. It was manageable. He did one attempt and we took a break in between. And I was like, okay, that's all right. It's uncomfortable, but just trying to relax and just breathing. And our doula actually was able to come to that procedure. She was there and, gave me some essential oils, but just trying to like relax as much as I could. But it was manageable. I know for some people it isn't always, but I was glad I was able to handle it.
Awesome. And so 3 tries and he didn't turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we thought too, it was one of those, we thought maybe he could have tried another one, but just don't want to push it. And I think it also because of the fact that we're open to a vaginal breech, it was like, we don't even stress the baby out. Don't, push this into something that you really don't want to go through, like we tried a couple times, didn't really work out. So now let's just focus on the next step, or the next process.
Yeah. And they checked baby's heart rate beforehand for a while and then during, and then afterwards we hung around for about an hour. So they just kept an eye on his heart rate too to make sure he was fine. And he was happy as a clam in there. So, and then we just talked to that doctor about our other options from there. I've heard that sometimes doctors will attempt, for another appointment or go to see someone else. And he said, no, we just do kind of the one appointment for the ECB. So then we just talked to him about, the next step and talked to him mainly about vaginal breech and just to hear what he had to say and his experience with it.
Yeah. And that was the other thing too. After they performed the ECB, they realized that he was frank breech. And they said that's optimal positioning for vaginal breech. I'm blanking right now the other 2 positions, but those are, I can't remember the second one. They still can, but it's very unlikely. And then the third position, no, they won't perform a vaginal breech at that point. I can't remember what is it.
So it looked favorable for vaginal birth.
Mm-hmm.
And did he do like an informed consent discussion with you, or like how did you leave that appointment being like, all right, that's what we're going to do? Or did you say we're going to go home and think about it?
Yeah, they had given us some forms too to look over for consent. So we kind of read through that. But after that, I was highly considering a vaginal breech. And then, we went home and did more research and talked about it. And I was, within, a few days and a week, I was like, I think we want to do this. So then we talked about transferring our care over to that hospital to be with that doctor. And, we had another prenatal appointment and just doing our research. The more we looked into it, the more confident we felt that this is just feels right for us.
Yeah, and the information that they gave us, even leaving after ECV, he was straight to the point. He didn't sugarcoat it in any kind of way. He said, this could happen if we proceed this way, and this can happen if we proceed that way, And that for me felt very reassuring. Leaving, I felt good, being like, okay, I personally would like for you to go see him, referring to Nate, being like, this would be, I think, a great fit just because, one, he performed our ECV, and we loved him even for that, and the nurses and everything. But then also the information that they gave us for the next step in the procedure, and to the fact that he's done X amount of how many vaginal breech births. So he's very experienced with this. You know, it just felt like we're in good hands. You know, he didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't leave us in the dark. He was like, this could happen this way, this could happen this way. I mean, he even got down to the point of breaking down like the percentages of cesareans and like hospitals and how they were. It was just a fascinating man.
So it reminds me a lot of the three-legged stool of evidence-based care that you learned about in your class, with like having accurate information, statistics, research to help you make a decision, and then having a care provider who's familiar with all of the latest research, and also having your goals, preferences, and values honored and asked about.
Yeah, definitely.
And it really sounds like you hit the trifecta. Like you got the right provider, you had the information, and you together talked and decided on what you preferred. And so you went for it.
Yeah, we went for it.
Yep. Yeah.
So when was it that you decided for sure you were going to go for a vaginal breech birth?
I mean, it was probably like for sure maybe a week after that. So 38, 39 weeks.
Okay.
And, you know, then we just, set up our prenatals and
that was like the other part too, though, is that like another reason why we went with them is because it gave the option for the vaginal breech is that you get more time to have your baby turn. Like, because I was just looking
instead of scheduling a cesarean right at 39 weeks or 38 weeks.
Exactly. You actually get a little bit more time for that, you know, possibility for your baby to turn. And like even just looking up like information on that, like the percentages and how high that is for how many babies turn right before their due date. Yeah, not due date, but like before they go in. Like they'll go in for their cesarean and then their baby is turned, or let's say they push it out a little bit longer, their baby's turned. So it was like it felt nice to the fact that they were willing to push that time out, you know, even with the vaginal breech, you know, they were just like, yeah, we're just going to take your time, you know, hopefully he turns.
Spontaneous labor is definitely what they like to see.
Yeah, they really promote that. So that felt real good leaving, knowing that too.
Okay. So, I know Jenoa was born on his due date right at 40 weeks, but so what happened in that 39th week? How were you preparing, or what were you doing? How are you getting yourself into the best mindset for the birth?
We were still doing all of our exercises. I was still going to the chiropractor, spinning babies. I'm like, there's still a chance. And I started to change my language, you know, talking to baby boy in my belly and saying, you know, from we need you to turn, like, come on. And then changing to like, if you don't want to turn, if you can't, like, that's okay. You know, we're going to make it work. And just having that, I think talking to your baby is really important. And so just kind of changing our mindset from like, okay, we're going to make this, you know, get him to turn, to instead like, if he doesn't, that's okay. Like I actually honestly feel okay about it because we're in good hands at this other hospital with this doctor, and we know that we can do vaginal breech, and I felt like confident that we were doing the right thing, and really just excited to get him here.
Yeah. It was just crazy though too, the amount of information, you know, like even like looking at like the 39 weeks, but from 35 to 39, the amount of information that we took in for just finding out about him being breech was absolutely insane. It was the percentage for vaginal breech, or like vaginal breech in the United States, how low it is compared to like internationally, how the practice is kind of a forgotten thing, you know. And then like even talking with the doctor or the OB, he said how they're starting to practice it more in Canada, and they're starting to implement it like vaginal breech around the world more, just because of how common it really is. It was just interesting to hear all that kind of information, you know. So it was just digging in more and more, but at the same time, it's a lot of information, but it's not very detailed, you know. It's not kind of like, this is kind of all it is. There isn't like a crazy amount of percentages, but when you talk for the United States at least, but when you talk about like outside the world, they have percentages that you wouldn't even believe, you know?
Yeah, and just even watching videos too of breech birth, and just, you know, saying like, oh, look at these people do it, and hearing other people's stories, and just reading like blogs and articles about people's birth, and just learning like, oh, this person did it, and just like, why can't I do it? Just, it's possible.
So you thought you learned a lot in the EBB childbirth class, and then you found out your baby was breech, and you had to learn like a whole additional world on top of that, because that's like a specialty in and of itself.
Yeah.
You were cramming yourselves full of information, but it sounds like you also had a really good mindset of, staying calm and confident in your body.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Definitely.
So tell us your birth story. How did it begin?
So it was, let's see, like I slept like my whole pregnancy. It was like smooth up until, our breech learnings, but it was like a Wednesday night and I like slept terribly. I was just achy and like had to keep going to the bathroom. And then Thursday I was working from home all day and I was just like achy and uncomfortable. And I was like, okay, maybe he's moving down lower. Like this is probably just the end of pregnancy feels. And that was the day before my due date. And I was so comfortable that I was like, he's not going to be here. Like he's going to go past his due date. Well, by the end of my work day, I was starting to have contractions. Andrew was like, maybe we should start timing these. I'm like, yeah we probably should. So I was just kind of handling them, and we called our doula to just say like, okay, something's happening. And she's like, well, just try to relax and do this. And I ended up getting into the tub at home, and I was very calm. And then Andrew was helping me with some pain relief. We really liked the class. We learned the hip squeeze was one of like my favorite go-to positions.
That was the go-to.
So just being on all fours and him squeezing my lower hips. And then so we talked to our doula again and then called the hospital, and they were like, well, it sounds like you can make your way here. Like you don't have to rush. But I was like, okay, are we doing this?
Yeah, they said you don't have to rush, but mind you, it's like from our house to the hospital, it was about 40 minutes. So it was like one of those, like, you don't have to rush, but you might want to start coming in this direction because you don't know what possibly could happen and you don't want to be stuck in the car situation. So.
And this is in a different state, right? State lines to get there.
We're in Minnesota, and then we had to bounce over to Wisconsin. So
So we got there, and I think it was like 9:15 p.m. we checked in, and then the nurse was asking if I wanted to be or have a cervical check, and my mindset going, I'm like, I don't want any of these, but I was like, well, we just got here, my water hasn't broken, like, yeah, let's see where we're at. So she checked, and I was 3 centimeters dilated and 90% effaced. And she was very excited. She's like, this is really good for a first-time mom. And I was like, okay.
Like just motivation. That was real nice hearing that. Like, oh yeah, all right, things are going good. Things are going great,
Yep. And then my doula got there soon after that. And then I was just, having contractions and started using cool rags on like my head and the back of my neck. That felt really good. And we just kept going to the position for contractions with the hip squeezes and going on all fours. And I was like, I went to go sit on the toilet. I was on the bed. I was on the birthing ball, just kind of all over. So then let's see, from there, I have my timeline here. I got into the tub around midnight at the hospital, and then I was starting to feel a tiny bit pushy, and I was just like unknown, like, I don't know, like I feel like, something's like we're getting closer to something. And then I was in the tub just trying to relax, and then I like felt something.
Something's happening. Something's happening.
I was like, something is coming out, something. And they're like, what? They're like, okay, stand up. And I saw my amniotic sac had started to come out. So it was just like a little like balloon just like hanging there. And so like I touched it, and then they got me a mirror, and I was like, oh my God, like I was like, that's so cool. So like, okay, I gotta get out of the tub. So then from there, I think I got like back on the bed and just having more contractions. And
yeah, they checked her first, and when they checked, they did not want to know how like where she was at. So they told the doula and myself, and come to find out she was 8 centimeters. And
this was 2.5 hours after I had gotten there.
Yep.
And wow, at a 3, you went from a 3 to an 8 in 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So it's
like, all Right.
And
but
then,
I didn't know at that point.
Yeah, she didn't know. And then next thing you know, they also called the OB in because they're
That's
like, it's kind of like it's coming, or the baby boy's coming.
Getting close.
Yeah, getting close. So next thing you know, Nay ends up getting out of the tub because the sac. They were like, okay, let's just get you out of the tub and everything else. So then we get Nay over to the bed, and next thing you know, the OB walks in, and that's when, what did you say to him?
I was like, oh, you're here. Something must be happening, or it must be getting close. He was like, well, of course I'm here. But
yeah.
I don't think he knew at that point that I didn't know how dilated I was or anything. So I just like looked up because I was kind of starting to be in my own like little world, like keeping my head down, like my eyes were closed a lot. And then I saw him, I was like, oh, he's like, well, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so this is a good sign. So then let's see, it was about just before 1 a.m. My water broke and I was on the bed on all fours.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was about 20 minutes after, that's when I started to push with contractions. And then I had a few on the bed, and then I went to the birthing stool.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I kind of started to realize better, like how to push. Because, this is all new to me, and just having to like really like let yourself go and just like.
They called it bearing down, just bear down, because it was one of those, like you would get to a certain point in the contraction, like even just pushing to where you're pushing. It seemed like she was pushing, but then she kind of just was. They would just kind of stop, kind of just like, oh. It was like they're like, just bear down. When you get to that last little stretch, just you ride that wave and push it. Just push as much as you can. And
then so like on the birthing stool was weird, but just like letting like all of your weight like go down, and it's just like figuring out like, how to do it, and then just hearing a reaction from like the nurses and Andrew and my doula in the room, just like, oh yeah, that's it, okay, and then figuring out, okay, like I'm making progress.
Yeah.
So then I went on back onto the bed and was on like my side, and then I was like on my back where I was like holding my knees and just pushing, and then just hearing like the people in the room get excited because then they saw Jenoa's butt come out first, and then so it's just like, okay, like here we go.
What was it? A meconium, right? Yeah.
Yep, and then he had meconium, so
you saw
he pooped like several times.
Yeah,
as he was coming out.
Yeah, just because again, vaginal breech, so it's like his butt's coming first, and it was like it
just kind of like squeezes the poop out of him.
Yeah, it squeezed it literally. And it was one of those. It was like we saw it coming, and I didn't know what to think. I was like, "What is that? His arm? And I'm just blanking at." And then the doctor's like, "No, that's his butt." And here comes it, and then there's his lower cheek. Oh, now here comes his upper cheek. Here it comes. And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's his butt! Like I can't. Like he's here. Like this whole time he's been just this close to us. And to finally see, I was just overwhelmed, just like of excitement and joy and happiness."
Yep, and then his torso came out, and then his right arm first, and then his left arm was stalled for a moment, so the doctor had to help with his arm and his head, because a lot of times babies will like tuck their chin down to kind of help get out, but he had his head like up, so the doctor had to like come in, and he stuck his hand up to try to get him out quickly.
Kind of tuck his chin down.
Tuck his chin, yep. Pull his head down or tuck his chin down so it's easier to come out. But I mean, that was the other thing too. Is like with vaginal breech, there's no hands on. They don't touch the baby, don't at all. Even like when he had the meconium coming out, the nurse was trying to she grabbed a towel and she was like trying to just clean up. And the OB stepped in and was like, "Don't even touch with the towel. Don't startle the baby. Cause we don't want any kind of erratic movements from him. Just let the process happen, So that was nice hearing that, being like, okay, thank you. Cause I remember that was like something he made very, very, very clear to us in the very beginning. It was like,
that's why it's important to have that experienced provider there who knows what to do and not do.
Yeah. So I saw a rocking chair in the room, like backing up, but just as when we went in for the ECV, I saw a rocking chair in the room, and he was like, yeah, hopefully I just sit here and just watch the whole thing happen. And I was like, really? That's like it? And then, yeah, sure. When baby Jenoa's on his way here, and here the doctor is in the rocking chair just hanging out. I was like, oh, he was serious. He's like, yeah, well, there's no hands on. It's you guys. You guys, the stage is yours. We'll only intervene when we need to. So it was nice hearing him say that to the nurse. She was very experienced too, but she was just trying to clean up, and he was like, don't even do that, because again, we want this to be all him, him and mother, just the process.
Yeah, he was kind of like, laid back unless, there was just like, okay, like go for it. But he would kind of let the nurses like take the lead, because I think he was also trying to teach them a lot too.
Yeah.
And then I would hear him click his flashlight to like look and check on, things. But it was great. Jenoa came out.
Yeah, it was his butt first and his legs followed right after, flopped down, and his right arm did too. And then the doctor had to step in just because of his arm was kind of not up in like the full upright position, but it was a little, it was hung up a little bit. So he had to move his arm just a little bit to help. So that was the first time that he actually jumped in to actually touch Jenoa. But then after that, that's when it was his head. And Nay was doing she was doing this like little rocking movement.
Kind of like going back and forth.
That just helped. And that it was helping in the beginning. And then it got to the point to where you could tell Nay, because when it got to that last stretch, it was like push. And like you want to ride with the contractions and everything else. But it seemed like I felt something from the doctor to where we couldn't wait. He couldn't wait for that next contraction to get the head like fully out to where Jenoa kind of came out. The videos we've seen, a lot of babies with vaginal breech, they actually help out. Like we're asking even the doctor about this. Like it seems like they help out. Like they'll sit there and move their legs or like their arm and everything.
The babies, they wiggle in different ways to get out.
That help out. Yeah. Jenoa wasn't doing that at the moment. So the doctor, he had this look in his eye. Like he was like, I have to step in now. Like this is like a call that I have to make. And he made the right call to where that experience again from all the births that he's delivered vaginally, vaginal breech. You could tell he was like, okay, I've seen this before, so I know how to react to this. So he actually ended up putting his hand inside Janae and pulling or tipping Jenoa's head forward so that the head would fully fall out, because again, his head was tilted back a little bit and then his legs and arms and everything were in the sitting up position. And then once he got the head out, I was able to cut the cord, but it was very like we wanted to, because that was the other thing too, like we wanted to have the cord as long as we could, but it was one of those in Jenoa's situation, they had to get him over to the warmer, and the doctor was able to still let me cut the cord. It was very frantic though. It was like it was fast. He gave me the look after Jenoa was out. He was like, "Here, take this cord right here, cut." And I cut, and then he ran. He literally just ran over to the warmer to help get Jenoa. Not necessarily breathing, because he was breathing. It seemed fine, but it took him a second to get his lungs expanded or being able to expand.
Yeah, so they had to use CPAP and get him. So I think they said it was 30 seconds to a minute before he had his first breath. So he basically came out limp, and I did not see him because I was facing this way, and Andrew saw everything. And he really at that point was, I think, traumatized a little bit because the baby wasn't moving. Yeah, and he was very thought the worst, but they got him to the warmer, and then after a minute he had a breath and a cry, and then I was like, what is going on?
And I just kept giving Nate a thumbs up, kind of, just because she still had to deal with but she had to go through with the placenta and everything else.
I mean, that was after.
Yeah, that was after, but it was still just like the whole process. It was like, I don't want to throw this on you just because thumbs up, everything's going good. But then also, though, the doctor did point out to us, I forgot that he pointed this out, but he said that can happen with vaginal breech.
Yeah, so we kind of knew that ahead of time, too. That was the question.
Their baby might need a little resuscitation after the birth.
But when you see it, you forget about it. It was like when I saw it was like I just completely like, oh my gosh, is this normal? Is this normal? And it's like just questioning everything, like, oh, is he okay? And then I saw a smirk, kind of, and then like little cry, and then a blink or whatever. And I was like, okay, okay, we're doing great. We're doing perfect.
Yeah. So at that point, I was like, they're just like right across, like, I don't know, 10 15 feet away in the warmer. So I was just kind of watching and waiting. And so, I was like, oh, he could have to go to the warmer, but he was over there for like 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So I was waiting and just like, and then, I like delivered my placenta. And then at that point, I was like, across the room, like, come on, Jenoa, like just kind of like talking to him. And so then they ended up rolling the warmer over to the bed to me. So I got to put my hand on him. And that's when I lost it. That's when I started crying, like, our baby, because I got to see him at that point. So it was like a little while. And I felt like I was pretty calm because I knew Drew was like right next to
it was nice.
baby.
It was nice too because the doctor, like, he's over there, like, got Jenoa over to the warmer. Then right away, the pediatrician, she was over there helping Jenoa with the CPAP, and the doctor told me to come over. Actually, he said, Andrew, come here. And he was like, just touch him, just hold him, just give him some skin to skin, just kind of be right here with him. And that was amazing, to the fact that he brought me over to the warmer and had me, involved with everything that was going on over there, just the comforting of Jenoa. And then it got to the point too where after, I think it was like that 30 minutes, of the doctor, he was like, yeah, he seems like he's doing okay. I mean, he's dropping, just bring the machine over. We need to get the baby over to mother, like, because they're very, very, very adamant about skin to skin. They wanted to get baby to mother as fast as possible. Typically in a great situation or ideal situation, it's right away. But with this situation, he had to go to the warmer first for a little bit, and then they got him over to mother. But it was a call again by the doctor that has been doing this for a while. He said, get him over to mother, at least we can open the door, mother can touch him, mother can be next to him and everything else. And I think it was like a few minutes after that, like 10, 15 minutes, I want to say, after that, not even, he was like, he can get out of the warmer and he can, let's do skin to skin, because
I think, the pediatrician was like, oh, that's not protocol. His numbers aren't all there yet. And the OB doctor was like, no, like, let's get him out. So
let's see what can happen with skin to skin.
We got Jenoa on my chest, and it almost immediately, all of his numbers, like his oxygen went up, like everything was perfect. He's like, wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, we should have done this a few minutes prior.
Right, yeah.
But it was great. And then, we just, he was on my chest for a little bit, and then we tried breastfeed like soon after that. But it was awesome. I was in labor for about 10 hours, and I think it was 3 hours of pushing.
Yeah.
So from there, I don't know what else.
And now we're here.
And you gave birth to a breech baby, and you didn't have major surgery, which is very rare in the United States.
And then also, no tears or anything, and then also no medication. That was the other thing. So, there were certain points that process that we talked afterwards. Janae was like, I feel like I could have towards this, but it got to the point to where it was like, we're already this far into labor and everything else. There's no point, Yeah,
I think like I had thought about like an epidural, like at the earlier stage, and I was in the tub, but I never vocalized it. And in my birth plan too, I wrote, and all of the nurses and the doctor looked at it thoroughly and said, I wrote in there, like, don't ask me for pain relief unless I, bring it up. And I never vocalized it, not even to Andrew.
And they never brought it up either. So that was real nice of them.
They really followed your birth plan. That's amazing.
Even at certain points to where it's like with the active labor pushing and everything else. So I had times where I was like, okay, is he progressing? Is he not progressing? And I'm just kind of looking back at the doctor and the nurses, and they're just like, we're just going to ride this out, And I think that was more so because of the factor of the birth plan, like we want this to be as natural as it possibly can be. And they respected that. And we thank.
What was your postpartum experience like then, going home with your new baby?
The day that we left the hospital, it was
surreal.
It was crazy because we got, Jenoa loaded up in the car seat, and like we were driving out of the parking lot, and Andrew and I both just like started crying, like, oh my God, like we have a son, like we're going home, like this is wild. And, I sat in the back seat with him, and I just looked at Andrew and like the rear view mirror, and his eyes are all teary.
Oh yeah.
And we got home, and, I like got on the couch and like fed him immediately and got settled, and Andrew brought everything into the house. And then we just, trying to stay on top of like looking at his cues and like just lots of snuggles and feeding him frequently, and sleeping, was very little, especially that first week.
But we kind of got it. I mean, we kind of got into a routine a little bit. The first like week, again, too, like our doula told us, what is it, the 15? The 5s.
The 5-day rule, or is it like,
yeah.
Well, she had
5
recommended.
days. Yeah, what is it? 5 days next to the bed, or 5 days in bed, 5 days next to the bed, and then
days like around the bed.
bed.
Just going to be better for your postpartum healing, you know, not going upstairs and trying to like listen to all of those things, to just take it easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from our class too, we had learned, like, you know, it prepared Andrew to like know how to help, like,
yes,
get me a water, like,
yes,
help me, like him helping me, like trying to get set up
pillows,
for breastfeeding too, like getting the baby in the position. And it was a lot, you know.
Eating was a huge thing too. I was like, Nate,
give me some snacks.
Yeah, there'd be times she'll be feeding Jenoa just because it's so often, you know, especially fresh, brand new baby. It was one of those, okay, well, I know you're hungry. Okay, you're feeding him. I'll help feed you, you know.
Yeah,
like,
he would like literally give me bites of food while I was, you know, feeding him, and just being a rock star husband, helping out with everything. Yeah. And we ended up we waited, it was almost a week before we had family visit. And
due to COVID again. I mean,
yeah, just because COVID. So we had 3 family members come and visit us, and they all had COVID tests done. And we're just, you know, cautious with like hand washing and all that stuff. And so my mom had come up, and she is always very helpful. She, you know, is like making all of the meals and doing dishes and laundry. And Andrew's really good at that too, but it was nice to have a break. And she would hang on to baby, and we would go nap together for a while.
And that was the other thing too. In the beginning,
awesome.
We got into, like, again, I was saying earlier, the routine was
sleeping.
Sleeping. So my really was like, you just gave birth, you just went through all this, you need the rest. Like, I'm sorry, like, we need your body needs some healing and everything else. So if you feed, I can take him, and then you just go into another room, like, because we have a spare bedroom by our living room. It was like, you go into the spare bedroom, shut the door, take a nap, like, just try to get some solid sleep. And then when you're done with your session, then it would say feeding time 2 hours or 3 hours at the moment. Then she'll come out and feed, and then I will go in there. So it was kind of like leapfrogging off of each other. But then also too, with the postpartum, just to throw this out there, I wish that more partners, let's say for men, I should say, can more time when it comes down to like maternity leave, to where
I was going to ask, how much time did you have? Because it sounds like
because I work in the restaurant industry, all my jobs pretty much are doing seasonal right now. So when spring opens, when spring hits, that's when they're going to open back up, and patios and all this other stuff. So it was really nice to the fact that I'm kind of just at home. So it was like I kind of got maternity leave myself, you know, because I could only imagine how that because a week is just not enough, to be honest with you. Yeah. I don't understand why it's not more, because there's so much going on in that first week, even just the process. I mean, newborn, you have another human being in your life, you know, and that you're taking care of. Just that process alone was a lot. But easing into that first week blew by, you know, and I could only imagine if I had to go back to work right after that, and Nate was stuck at home feeding him, trying to take a nap, or like, it would just be a lot. So I feel like we're very fortunate during these times to the fact that I was able to be at home and actually be that support, to where, okay, well, after this week, okay, guess what? You can get your full 3 hours or 2 hours of rest and not have to worry about baby boy. And you know what I mean? Like, just being able to bounce off of each other was absolutely a blessing.
Yeah, I've talked to a few other couples who had a similar experience where they almost got this like unexpected leave because of COVID that allowed them both to be at home. It's a little bit of a silver lining for some families, I think.
It really is.
But it definitely, I think you're right. People who experience that during COVID, that ability to be home with a new baby, I think it'll make for a lot more strong advocates for paternity leave and paid maternity leave and paternity leave for the future legislation, hopefully in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I hope a lot more men or just partners in general band together and kind of voice their opinion about this, because it just blows my mind to the fact that this is all that's given, you know. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I get 12 full weeks, but Andrew would have had to go back to work. So
I would have had to take a week off. It would have been unpaid, I would take a week off unpaid. And some jobs, they offer the partner, whatever, a week. Most of them don't. You just have to take off yourself, and just one of those, like, okay, I could use sick pay, or I could use something like that. You got to use something that's meant for something else to combat to this,
Well, thank you so much, Janae and Andrew, for sharing your experience and your insights. And I got to see your baby on Skype, which was so adorable. Any final questions or comments for me?
My only thing is I wanted to ask in the evidence base if there could be more discussion of vaginal breech, just because, again, it was one of those, it was thrown at us, and like we went in and like we saw this certain section, but it was like, it wasn't a lot, but then again, there's not a lot of information out there about this, about vaginal breech. It just seems like, especially again for the United States, is just jump into cesarean. Let's just, here you go. We're just going to do this.
They don't give you all your options.
No, they don't give you.
Cesarean is a good option for a lot of people, but it shouldn't be the only option. Because then it's not really a choice.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think, that's the biggest thing is just, I don't know, from what we went through, it's just like, I felt like really empowered and just want to encourage other people that if, just because a doctor tells you like, this is what to do, doesn't mean you need to, align with it. Like what's going to work for you, and do your research and find out as much information as you can. And, there's resources out there that, can help you and just make your birth can be like what you want it to be.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot to learn.
Yeah.
I did want to say, so you all inspired me for our guest next week. So your episode is airing on this Wednesday, April 7th. Next week, April 14, we have Dr. Rick Fries and Dr. David Hayes of Breech Without Borders, who travel around the world training doctors, midwives, how to do breech vaginal births.
Right.
And they're coming on the podcast next week to talk about the research evidence on breech vaginal birth. So
that is
very excited. I think that's going to be a really important episode. And then the week after that, we're going to do just an update, kind of a little podcast about the external cephalic version that you all experienced. So hopefully there will be these little mini series of podcast episodes that we'll put on the podcast, also on YouTube, and hopefully it'll help parents who are in a similar situation as you were.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Because that was another thing too. We asked the doctor, or just like nurses and everything at the hospital. We were like, so when this doctor retires or when they're done, who's going to like take? And they're like, that's a good question, because it's just something that's just not practiced in the United States anymore, really.
Yeah. Well, I'd encourage you to check out. I don't know if you found it when you were doing your research, but it's called breechwithoutborders.org. And they have tons of resources, videos, articles, research. And then they have the live trainings for pros in the field too.
Okay.
And they have a new website. It's been totally revamped since COVID. And there's just like a lot of information there.
Yeah, we did check that out. They had a lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear.
Yeah.
So any parents who are listening who find themselves with a breech baby, definitely check out breechwithoutborders.org. It's probably like the single best resource online for breech vaginal birth. So. All right. Thank you so much, Janae and Andrew. It was so nice meeting you both. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Evidence.
This podcast episode was brought to you by the book Babies Are Not Pizzas. They're Born, Not Delivered. Babies Are Not Pizzas is a memoir that tells the story of how I navigated a broken healthcare system and uncovered how I could still receive evidence-based care. In this book, you'll learn about the history of childbirth and midwifery, the evidence on a variety of birth topics, and how we can prevent preventable trauma in childbirth. Babies Are Not Pizzas is available on Amazon as a Kindle, paperback, hardcover, and Audible book. Get your copy today and make sure to email me after you read it to let me know your thoughts.